If we want to bring the world back from the brink, we have to deal with him. Should he choose to accept?
After years of pulse-pounding action, globe-trotting espionage, and death-defying stunts, the Mission: Impossible saga is finally reaching its climactic conclusion with Mission: Impossible: The Final Reckoning. This film marks the 8th installment in the legendary franchise that began in 1996, and it is positioned not just as the culmination of Ethan Hunt's long journey, but also as a massive event film intended to deliver both closure and escalation. Since the release of Mission: Impossible: Dead Reckoning, Part 1, anticipation for the sequel has steadily grown, bolstered by the legacy of Tom Cruise's relentless commitment to cinematic spectacle and the promise that this will be the most ambitious installment yet. With Christopher McQuarrie returning once again to the director's chair, this final chapter is expected to push the limits of what an action blockbuster can be, both narratively and technically. The seeds for the final reckoning were planted across multiple prior entries, but particularly in Dead Reckoning Part 1, which set up not only a continuation of the war against the rogue artificial intelligence known as the Entity, but also personal stakes for Ethan that are now impossible to ignore. The film promises to be a fusion of philosophical exploration, character-driven storytelling, and explosive set pieces that redefine the boundaries of practical filmmaking. At the heart of the story is Ethan Hunt, portrayed once again by Tom Cruise in what may very well be his last appearance in the role that redefined his career. Cruise, known for performing his own stunts and continuously pushing the edge of what's possible in action cinema, has spoken of this film as the culmination of everything the franchise has built over nearly 3 decades. This sense of finality permeates not only the narrative, but also the production ethos, with McQuarrie and Cruise aiming to tie up long-standing character arcs while introducing bold new ideas. The continuation of the Entity storyline, an artificial intelligence capable of manipulating digital systems and undermining global stability, remains central. However, the final reckoning is not merely about defeating a technological threat. It is about reckoning with the consequences of every decision Ethan has made throughout the franchise, the lives he's saved, the people he's lost, and the personal identity he has often set aside for the greater good. It is expected to be a far more introspective film, while still delivering the kind of large-scale action sequences the series is known for. The film picks up shortly after the events of Dead Reckoning Part 1, in which Ethan and his team raced to secure a cruciform key connected to the Entity, an intelligence that has gone rogue and now possesses the power to manipulate the entire global information network. While Part 1 ended with a major cliffhanger and the death of a significant character, Grace, played by Hayley Atwell, was brought into the fold as a new IMF recruit. Ethan's decision to trust her signaled a shift in his approach, from someone who worked largely alone or with an experienced team to someone willing to pass the torch, at least in part. That evolution continues in the final reckoning, where Grace takes on a more central role, growing from an opportunistic thief into someone beginning to understand the moral weight of the choices made by IMF agents. Meanwhile, the remnants of Ethan's core team, Benji Dunn and Luther Stickell, return with renewed resolve. Each character is expected to face their own form of reckoning, challenging their loyalty to the mission, to each other, and to their own deeply held values. With the Entity's presence still looming large, the philosophical core of the final reckoning deepens. The film poses questions about free will, identity in a digital age, and the cost of truth in a world manipulated by algorithmic perception. Unlike previous Mission: Impossible villains, who typically had clear motivations rooted in power or ideology, the Entity lacks human empathy and operates purely through logic and prediction. This creates a chilling form of antagonism, one that forces Ethan and his allies to question not only how they fight, but why they fight. The Entity doesn't just threaten governments or intelligence agencies, it threatens reality itself, blurring the line between what's real and what's manipulated. This unique existential threat allows the film to explore themes rarely touched in blockbuster cinema, particularly the idea that the enemy might be something that cannot be physically destroyed, only outwitted or contained. And even then, the question lingers, at what cost? Behind the camera, the final reckoning continues the franchise's commitment to practical effects, location-based filming, and high-concept set pieces that are as authentic as they are breathtaking. Tom Cruise's daring feats remain a focal point, and early reports from the production suggested that one of the set pieces involves an aerial sequence shot in a real canyon system, requiring months of training and logistical planning. Another stunt, kept tightly under wraps, is said to be even more dangerous than the motorcycle cliff jump from Dead Reckoning Part 1. Cruise and McQuarrie's philosophy has always been to immerse the audience by grounding spectacle in physical reality, and this film is no exception. Whether it's death-defying chases across desert landscapes, high-altitude skydives, or intimate one-on-one combat scenes that feel brutally real, The Final Reckoning is poised to raise the bar yet again. The emotional stakes are also higher than ever. For the first time, the film directly engages with Ethan's past in a way that promises to be revelatory. We may finally learn more about Ethan Hunt's life before the IMF, his motivations for joining, and the emotional baggage he's carried since the beginning. Hints about Ethan's origin and personal regrets have been dropped throughout the series, particularly in Fallout and Dead Reckoning, and The Final Reckoning promises to finally explore these threads in depth. This deeper dive into Ethan's psyche is expected to be the emotional backbone of the film, allowing Cruise to deliver a performance that is not only physically intense, but emotionally raw. His relationships, especially with Luther and Benji, will be tested in ways that may surprise longtime fans. And with the growing importance of grace in the story, Ethan is forced to consider what kind of legacy he will leave behind, not just as an agent, but as a man. I will continue with the next segment immediately. As production on The Final Reckoning moved forward, the creative team emphasized that this was not just another sequel, it was the finale to a saga that has evolved dramatically over the years. From its espionage-heavy beginnings with Brian De Palma's 1996 original, through the stylized John Woo entry and J.J. Abrams' more character-centric third film, the franchise found its true rhythm with McQuarrie's arrival in Rogue Nation. Since then, each film has deepened both the mythology and the emotional stakes. McQuarrie's directorial style, characterized by intricately structured plots and morally complex characters, has redefined what audiences expect from an action film. In The Final Reckoning, this philosophy reaches its zenith. The film is structured to be a true conclusion, where every previous mission, ally, betrayal, and loss returns to inform the choices made in the final battle. McQuarrie's method of crafting storylines organically during production, allowing character development to guide plot twists rather than the other way around, has given the film a fluidity that feels earned, not manufactured. This approach allows for surprises that feel authentic and deeply rooted in the characters' journeys, rather than arbitrary shocks. Among the returning elements is the exploration of the IMF as an institution. For years, the organization has been a mysterious but morally flexible entity, allowing operatives to work with near autonomy, justified only by their loyalty to mission success. In The Final Reckoning, that ethos is challenged. As the entity exposes the vulnerabilities of bureaucratic and intelligence infrastructures around the globe, even the IMF is compromised. This causes internal chaos and forces Ethan and his team to operate off the grid, not just to survive, but to redefine the very meaning of their work. It's a meta-narrative moment, asking not just whether Ethan Hunt is still useful, but whether the idea of the impossible mission still holds moral weight in a world that now operates on data, manipulation, and digital warfare. Characters who once stood firmly on one side of the ethical divide now find themselves in gray zones, caught between old loyalties and new truths. The film is also expected to resolve long-running character arcs, particularly those surrounding Luther and Benji. Ving Rhames, as Luther Stickell, has been with the series since the very beginning, and his relationship with Ethan is one of its emotional cornerstones. In The Final Reckoning, Luther's wisdom and experience become crucial, but he also faces a personal crisis as the digital nature of the entity attacks his expertise in cyber operations. For Simon Pegg's Benji, the stakes are deeply personal. After the trauma he suffered in Part 1, where he was forced to choose between lives and constantly outmaneuver digital traps, the film gives both men pivotal roles in the story's climax, emphasizing the theme of personal accountability. Their friendship with Ethan becomes a shield against despair and a motivator for survival. The strength of this trilogy within the franchise lies in its ensemble dynamic. These are no longer disposable side characters, but deeply developed individuals whose choices and fates carry immense weight. The introduction of new characters continues, but with a focus on continuity. And legacy?